If you haven't taken the Big Five personality test yet, then you probably should. It'll give you a better idea of why you like certain things, why some things annoy you, and what your strengths and weaknesses are. Basically, it's like a little cheat sheet for understanding yourself and making life a little easier to navigate. This is my result, by the way. Depending on the site where you take the test, the result could vary, but not drastically. But before you proceed to this video, I recommend that you take the test now. It's available online. It's a 10-minute test. Come back here once you get your results so we can discuss further. A disclaimer, I am not a professional, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychoanalyst. This video is just for very basic entertainment purposes only video. So please take this video with a grain of salt. Seek professional help if you want to get an official diagnosis. So you've probably heard of the MBTI or the Myers-Briggs type indicator. Depending on the site, it could be an INTJ or INTP. It varies. But what makes the Big Five even more interesting is that it's based on empirical research and thousands of data from real people. It's not just a theory like MBTI. They studied thousands of words in different languages. These words are what people use to describe themselves and others. And then psychologists gathered those data over decades, analyzed them to find patterns to see which personality traits group together. This just makes the Big Five more scientifically grounded and widely used because it is empirical, it's based on research and not just theory. It's universal, it is found across cultures and languages. It is stable over time, traits remain relatively consistent across a person's life, and it's applicable. It's used in psychology, business relationships, and even AI personality modeling. If you want to know, this is the evolution of the Big Five from the 1930s to the 1990s. So it's not just something that they formulated within a short span of time. Now let's talk about your results. The first aspect of the Big Five is openness to experience. Openness to experience describes how curious, imaginative, and open-minded a person is. So people high in openness enjoy new experiences, creative ideas, and thinking outside the box. On the other hand, people with low openness prefer routine, familiarity, and practical thinking. They like sticking to what they know and may not be as interested in abstract ideas or artistic expression. I scored 68% for openness, so I'm kind of like in the middle. This means that there are traits that I'm gonna get under high openness as well as low openness. In my case, I do appreciate, beautiful aesthetic looking things. I like music. I am also interested in philosophy, but I could never be one of those people who would gaze at a painting and cry. So I definitely agree that I am in the middle. And then there's intellectual curiosity and thinking style. If you're high in openness, you enjoy deep discussions, theories, and abstract concepts. But if you're low in openness, you prefer practical, straightforward information. You prefer concrete over abstract thinking. What is abstract versus concrete thinking? For example, my abstract thinking manifests during conversations. We would be watching news about racism, something that really happened, something concrete. And then somehow between the back and forth, I would find a way to kind of philosophize things. I would say, oh, isn't that interesting how people get hostile to other people who are different from them? Isn't that interesting how universal it is that there's a tendency for humans to antagonize other humans who belong in different groups? So I would make those comments eventually in a conversation. It's a kind of philosophizing things, pointing out patterns, trying to see the bigger picture. But the thing is, that's an idea that I picked up from the internet. It's not really something that I invented or formulated. The reason why I remember that and I'm able to use that in a conversation is because I always would find pleasure in discussing things in the abstract. But because I'm in the middle of the spectrum, there are times when I would also prefer practical and straightforward information. The second aspect is conscientiousness. Conscientiousness refers to a person's degree of self-discipline organization, responsibility, and goal-directed behavior. People high in conscientiousness tend to be organized, reliable, and hardworking, while those low in this trait may be more spontaneous, careless, or disorganized. High conscientiousness is hardworking, persistent, self-disciplined, while low conscientiousness procrastinates, lacks motivation, avoids effort. So that's like the default. It doesn't mean you can never be persistent. It just means that when left to your own devices, that's your likely default. To change that, you're going to have to exert some considerable amount of effort to counteract that default. High conscientiousness stays focused, resists temptations, delays gratification, pushes through setbacks, stays committed. My conscientiousness is 75%, so it's kind of high. By the way, if you scored high in conscientiousness and you don't really agree with stays focused, resists temptations, and delays gratification, that's probably because we've been bombarded by a lot of stimulations like social media. But if you could somehow remove these distractions, chances are you're going to stick to your goals. You would be more able to stay focused. High conscientiousness sets long-term goals, follows through diligently, while low struggles to set or stick to goals and is easily distracted. High conscientiousness is thorough, double-checks work, avoids careless mistake. This is why it is frustrating for me with high conscientiousness to work in a fast-paced environment, especially because my openness is not really that high. I don't really have a lot of time to check and to double-check my work, so it feels like I'm making a lot of mistakes, and I would really like to be in a work environment where I'm able to check my work, take the time, make sure that everything's right. You know what I mean? So when I was working as a CSR, that would bug me quite a bit. When each call is timed and each average handling time is measured. High conscientiousness saves money, budgets, avoids impulsive spending. If you're low in conscientiousness, you would probably spend impulsively and struggle with saving. High conscientiousness plans for risks, take precautions. I have a feeling that people who get life and health insurance policies are people who are likely high in conscientiousness because they think ahead, think of the future, and think about what could possibly go wrong. If you're low in conscientiousness, you probably are reckless, you ignore risks, act without forethought. So note that these may not all apply to you to a T. I know a low conscientiousness person who does not necessarily recklessly spend his money. I'm high in conscientiousness, but it does not necessarily mean that I always keep my things and desk tidy. So it depends. It's a spectrum. So you could fall in the middle, in the moderate high or moderate low. Now the third aspect is extroversion. Extroversion refers to a person's degree of sociability, energy, and enthusiasm in engaging with the external world. People high in extroversion tend to be outgoing, talkative, and energetic, while those low in this trait, introverts, may be more reserved, independent, and reflective. Extroverted people are outgoing, energized by social interactions. Introverted people, they are reserved. They prefer solitude or small groups. They're not necessarily shy or socially anxious. Their brains are just wired differently. They usually think before they speak. I'm going to show you the table here. That's pretty much self-explanatory, so I'm going to leave you to read all that. To understand the difference between introverts and extroverts, let's talk about the two parts of the autonomic nervous system: the sympathetic nervous system, fight and flight system, and the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system. The neurotransmitter or the hormone linked to sympathetic nervous system is dopamine. Dopamine is highly involved when a person seeks excitement through social interactions and new experiences. On the other hand, the hormone linked to parasympathetic nervous system is acetylcholine. It says here that acetylcholine is involved when a person engages in deep focus, reflection, and calm activities that require sustained attention and minimal external stimulation. Now, note that all humans have both of these systems. The only difference between extroverts and introverts is that with extroverts, their sympathetic nervous system is more active. With introverts, the parasympathetic nervous system is more active. Extroverts are more stimulated by dopamine. They also have a lower baseline of dopamine, so they need to engage in dopaminergic, high energy activities to feel stimulated. While introverts, they have quite a high sensitivity to dopamine. A dopamine level that's quite normal for an extrovert would be too much for an introvert. The neurotransmitter they prefer is acetylcholine. That is why they prefer being in solitude, or if they socialize, only with a small group of people, and their brains are naturally active in a calm state. For an extrovert, that would be too boring, too understimulating. It says here, introverts' brains are naturally more active in a calm state, so they don't need a lot of excitement to feel stimulated. So if you force an extrovert to engage in acetylcholine-driven activities like meditation, reading, walking in nature, deep reflection, they might feel bored, definitely, because it's too slow for them or too unstimulating. It's dopamine that they crave. But if you also force an introvert to engage in dopamine-filled activities like partying, networking, thrill-seeking, fast-paced social events, they might feel drained and mentally exhausted. Is it possible for an introvert to talk in public? Definitely. A lot of influential people are introverts as well as extroverts. And it's also very important to note that some people could fall in the middle, and they're called ambiverts. I think they have the best of both worlds. I scored quite low in extroversion. It's around 31%, and I suspect that the accurate percentage would be, I think, lower than this. For me, this usually manifests when, after having talked to a stranger or to people, a large group of people, I would usually feel drained and I would just want to close the door and just spend time alone. Now let's talk about the fourth aspect, which is agreeableness. Agreeableness refers to a person's degree of warmth, cooperation, and compassion in their interactions with others. People high in agreeableness tend to be trusting, altruistic, empathetic, while those low in this trait may be more competitive, skeptical, and even manipulative. As you can see, under compassion, highly agreeable people are empathetic, considerate, cares about others' feelings, giving, generous, while low agreeable people are less concerned with others' emotions, more blunt, less inclined to help, focus on personal gain. Again, these are the extremes. You could fall in the middle. Under trust, highly agreeable people believes in people's good intentions, sees the best in others. And I think this is because they themselves have kind intentions. What you feel is also what you expect other people would feel, even if that is not the case. For low agreeable people, they are skeptical. They assume others may be dishonest or selfish because they themselves are skeptical and they don't exactly trust other people. So what you do, you kind of project to other people and expect the same from them. For competitiveness, they're more collaborative than competitive, definitely, because they just want everyone to get along. While low agreeable people, they're driven by competition and they enjoy winning. Conflict resolution avoids conflict, seeks compromise, they're diplomatic. Low agreeable people, on the other hand, are argumentative, enjoys debating, and may escalate conflicts. For agreeableness, I scored 50%. And I suspect it has a lot to do with my very high level of politeness. But the compassion part of it is quite in the low level, I must admit. This means that I always act nicely with people, I say the right words, I say what's socially acceptable, but I'm not really high in compassion where you feel empathetic and like you kind of suffer for others type of thing. It's not like I'm a psycho or anything, it's just I'm kind of low in that regard. If you're high in politeness, you use kind words, you respect social norms. That's what I do. If you're low in agreeableness, you are blunt. You may come off as rude or insensitive. For forgiveness, let go of grudges, gives second chances, and holds grudges may seek revenge. For emotional support, highly agreeable people offers comfort, listens attentively. I could do this too, definitely. But I think there are others who will not only listen attentively and offer comfort, but also like cry for other people. I would do that from time to time, but it's not like I definitely know other people who are highly, highly compassionate. And I would never be like them in the true sense of the word. But I mean, I'm not a psychopath as far as I'm concerned. By the way, most psychopaths score really, really low in compassion, and that I guess kind of explains the manipulation, the predatory behavior. If you're a psychopath, of course, you're always only watching out for your own benefit, which I don't know. I don't do, by the way, I don't do, even if I'm kind of low in compassion. I think that generally the optimal level for agreeableness is in the middle. Too high agreeableness and people would have a tendency to walk all over you because they know that you're so nice about it. But too low of an agreeableness could be, let's just say, dangerous to other people. Think about psychopaths, for example. Now, let's talk about the last aspect, which is neuroticism. Neuroticism refers to a person's sensitivity to negative emotions such as anxiety, sadness, irritability, and emotional instability. So people high in neuroticism tend to be more prone to stress and mood swings, while those low in this trait are generally more emotionally stable, calm, and resilient. I've heard that generally men have lower neuroticism than women. And the theory is that in the evolutionary sense, it was important for women to be more sensitive to negative emotions because they were the caregivers of the offsprings. So it pays to be more vigilant to danger for their children. Emotional reactivity for highly neurotic people, they're easily stressed, anxious, and overwhelmed by emotions, while low neurotic people stay calm and composed even under stress. It's pretty self-explanatory. Just take the time to read that. But the general idea is you want to have a low level of neuroticism, typically moderate to low, but definitely not too high, because that would probably render you helpless to the life's challenges. Also, too low of a neuroticism would also render you to not worry at all and not feel fear, even if you should. For example, engaging in reckless behaviors like driving fast, because there's a good reason why fear exists. It's also to keep us safe. Neuroticism helps us to quickly react to dangers and threats. This enhances survival. But too high of neuroticism would prove to be hard to function day to day. My level of neuroticism is at 40%, which is kind of moderate. I would have preferred it to be a little lower than that. I would be less prone to over worrying, but it's okay. I think I can manage that and practice to make it a little lower, although I think it's not really technically possible to change it drastically, but at least I can manage that. I can, for example, expose myself to slightly stressful situations, more stressful than I can manage, and, eventually get used to it. But anyway, for now, it's fine. And you might be wondering, what's the ideal Big Five combination for someone working in customer service? This is just my theory. Feel free to challenge me in the comment section if you think otherwise. So for me, the ideal openness to experience for someone working in customer service is a balanced openness. You allow adaptability to different customer needs while also following company policies. Because if you are too low in openness, you will probably rigidly follow the policy without even considering the situation of the customer. You just follow it. But then there are situations where it pays to consider an exception. For conscientiousness, I think a high conscientiousness person would be great in customer service because they would be more detailed. They would see problems that are brewing in the future and take action now to mitigate or completely avoid those problems. For extroversion, I feel like should be moderate to moderately high. Highly extroverted people have more energy to socialize and you deal with different people all the time. While if you're on the low end of extroversion, meaning you're introverted, it would drain you quite substantially. And small talk would come naturally to you if you're highly extroverted. For introverts, usually untrained introverts, it would be quite awkward and they're just not in their natural element, when doing small talk. So it doesn't mean that they cannot learn it, but there would be some learning curve. It says here, I have a note here, by the way, I'm just going to read it. It just makes it easier to engage with people and stay energetic if you're extroverted. But too high of an extroversion might make a rep overly talkative or dominant or prone to seeking stimulation, which could overwhelm customers who prefer a calm interaction. True. In customer service, you should not just be doing all the talking, you should also be actively listening, which is something that probably comes easier to introverts. For agreeableness, the ideal for me would be middle to moderately high because it helps in being patient, empathetic, and polite to customers, but not too agreeable that customers can walk all over you. You can still stand your ground when the customer gets really abusive. For neuroticism, the best would be low to moderate because it keeps the stress levels manageable and you're calm under pressure, but maybe not too low to the point that you're going to antagonize the customer because you couldn't care less about being cooperative. But it doesn't mean that if you don't fall into these levels, you cannot work in customer service. It's just going to take more effort from you, because you're basically moving from your default to something that does not come naturally to you. If you want some further research, I just want you to know that these 5 aspects have their subcategories. So under openness to experience, if you want to dive deeper, because this is pretty basic information, I don't trust myself to dive deeper. I don't have a degree in psychology, but the big 5 has their subcategories. Openness to experience has openness and intellect. And then conscientiousness has industriousness and orderliness. Extraversion has enthusiasm and assertiveness. Agreeableness, compassion and politeness, which I already discussed. And neuroticism has withdrawal and volatility. And you also have to remember that combinations matter. For example, you have a very high level of openness to experience. That probably means that you will get easily bored with a repetitive task, for example, in customer service in a call center. But you might stick to the job because you have a high level of conscientiousness. You will stick to the job and you will still be excellent at it. So the combination also matters. I cannot discuss this. I don't trust myself to discuss these things. So if you want to do further research, there's a lot of resources online on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. If you have any suggestions for my next video, leave them in the comments below. Bye.